Kethevane, the first time in history this has happened. How did we get here?
Well, you really have to go back to the last midterm elections when the Republican Party did win back control of the House, but with an extremely slim majority. And then flash forward to January when Kevin McCarthy ran for Speaker of the House. If you remember back then, it took 15 rounds of voting and 4 days for him to actually manage to get that majority of Republican votes. And back then, you already had the likes of Representative Matt Gaetz, who tried to prevent him from getting the speakership, and in the end agreed, but that came with a lot of concessions from Kevin McCarthy to those hardliners, including Matt Gaetz. And one of those concessions was to change and to make it easier for Republicans in his caucus to challenge his leadership and to remove him from his position. He lowered the threshold to just one single vote to bring that motion to vacate, which led to his ouster. And with that slim majority, it meant that he really needed all the Republicans to back him because the Democrats refused to do so. Now, the reason why Matt Gaetz and some of these hardliners went after Kevin McCarthy's speakership was because of the shutdown crisis that we've been talking about in recent weeks. He went after Kevin McCarthy because Kevin McCarthy chose to avert the shutdown instead of going along with these hardliners who said they didn't want a stopgap measure. They didn't want to keep spending. And so he had to ally with the Democrats. And that's something that those hardliners did not forgive him for. And they had said it. If you deal with the Democrats, we will come after your speakership. And they did so. And it seems that McCarthy maybe thought that he had more people on his side, or that maybe some Democrats would come to his aid. That didn't happen, and that's where we are now without a speaker for the first time in history.
Right. So what happens next?
Well, now you're going to have someone who is basically going to be an interim speaker, except he's not really going to do any legislative business. That's Patrick McHenry. He's the one who gavelled out and said the speakership is vacant. He's going to be overseeing really some administrative events, but we're expecting probably a vote at some point next week if the Republicans manage to have a candidate, because that's unclear too. So we could see something maybe next Wednesday. There are some names that are already coming out. The front runner is Steve Scalise. He's the Republican majority leader. He was really an ally of Kevin McCarthy, but it seems that he's seen as more trustworthy than McCarthy, especially when it comes to those hardliner. Matt Gaetz, for example, said that he might be willing to vote for Steve Scalise. But what we're going to see is basically what happened back in January. They need to come together to have all the votes necessary to vote for a new speaker. There's also Jim Jordan. Jim Jordan is more of the hardliner wing of the Republican Party. He's a very Trumpy representative, and he may have the votes of the hardliners. So he hasn't said whether he was going to run, but you don't really need to run. People can just put out your name. Another thing to watch out for is that the Democrats are also going to be putting down their candidate, which is going to be the minority leader, Hakeem Jeffries. And if there is a mistake with the Republican Party, if some people don't show up to vote, it could possibly happen that the Democrats actually get the votes, or maybe a few Republicans are so fed up with the infighting within their own party that they decide to vote for the Democrat. That's very unlikely, but we could also see that vote go on like we did with Kevin McCarthy for 15 rounds. So it doesn't seem to be really clear cut, and anyone who wants to get those votes will likely have to make his own concessions. Kevin McCarthy gave one piece of advice to whoever is going to run for that job. He says, change the rules, meaning try to get away from that one-person motion to vacate that he had to give in to get the speakership.
Kethevane, thanks for that. France 24's Kethevane Gorjestani.